Yes.
What do you think what's going on in the Arab world? Do you think it could spread? Because it seems to be spreading almost every day a little bit, the anger and the common folks against what they have to endure. Do you think it could ever reach us?
Uh, Let me say one thing first. I know some of you have not had a book signed. I'll take this as the last question and then sign the books that are waiting to be signed. What's happening, of course, is that long repression of corrupt governments in Tunisia and Egypt could not be any longer maintained. And this younger generation of people with Facebook, we would not have had the uprising in Tunisia. I'll come back to that story
Yes.
without the internet, and we would not have had the kind of uprising we did in Egypt without the internet. Mostly it's under 30. It's young people who see the absence of opportunity, who feel their future is constrained, who are demanding a freer society. And where the government is so corrupt, like he'd been in power 30 years, Mubarak, and you just can't sustain it that long. And there were so many cracks in it that the steam got through. In places like Saudi Arabia and Bahrain and others, mainly those that are very close allies of the United States government for the reasons of oil,
Right.
they can crack down. I think they won't happen there. But what it represents is unrepressed and irresistible fervor on the part of young people who feel the system closed off.
What if the United States weren't feeding arms to those
I think they would
regimes?
topple.
Sure.
I think they would topple. My wife and I gave the joint commencement 3 weeks ago at Whittier College. And for my part of the commencement, I quoted from a 24-year-old whom I don't know, but he'd written an op-ed in the New York Times just 3 days before, and he talked about the very subject you raised, and he said, what was happening is young people were seeing the vast, barren landscape of no opportunity, and they rose up, and he said, now watch out for America, watch out America. Young people in the Arab world are not the only ones frustrated,
Right.
and because he said
Unemployment.
unemployment among
Yes. Yeah.
recent college graduates
It's
is running
terrible.
24%. So I stopped and I asked the 444 young people graduating at Whittier, how many of you have a job starting next week or this summer? 25% of them said, held up their hand. I said, how many of you are going on to graduate school because you don't have a job or because you want to go to graduate school? Another 25%. How many of you are going home to live with your parents next week? 50% of them raised their hand. That's a phenomenon happening all over the country because young people are not getting jobs and they're going home to live with their parents. So yes, it's harder to have that kind of insurrection, moral, nonviolent insurrection in this country. We're 3,000 miles from coast to coast. We're big from top to bottom. We have a capital, but it's not in the center of the country like London. 250,000 Londoners have been protesting regularly because of the austerity cuts there. Or Cairo as the center of Egypt, or Tunis as the center of Tunisia. It's hard for us to congregate in such a physical mass that it's unavoidable. We had demonstrations in Wisconsin, California, and other places, but the media give them very little attention. But if you're jammed into the capital of Beijing, Tiananmen Square, or Cairo, or the two squares in Tunisia, you get a lot of attention from the media. In Tunisia, a very interesting story. You know how that rebellion started? Down in the center part of the country, there was an anonymous vendor, poor guy, who was having trouble making a living selling his goods from his stand. And he had to pay bribes to the police. And one day a police woman came by, and he just refused to pay the bribe. So she hit him with a stick and arrested him and took him to prison where he was beaten up. The story circulated orally throughout the town, but didn't make any of the press. It's government press in large part. But nearby, there was another young man working as a stringer on the web for Al Jazeera. And he heard about the story, checked it out, put it on the web,
Yeah.
like flares on a 4th of July. So the internet there was a big factor.
But we had Martin Luther King, get a lot of people come out. Could this happen again?
Actually, I think that confirms my point about geography. That was largely a southern
Yeah,
movement, geographically
yeah.
defined by young southern blacks and preachers and others who organized. Yes, folks went down from the north,
Right.
but it would be hard to sustain that across the country to where you get an extent that it's more than just a particular group
Right.
that is feeling the indignation. Could we, and I'm a reporter, not a prophet, I don't know if it could happen. I think an equivalent of it needs to happen, and actually I think we had it in the, peacefully in the election of 2008. I do think that it was more than Obama, it was after years of the oppression, the terrible
Yeah.
policies of the Bush administration, going to war, all of that. I think that there was a great angst in the country and a great fervor, and Obama tapped into it and brought out that, 22 million young people voted for him, who didn't vote, by the way, in 2010. And he tapped into that in a very positive way. And Americans were feeling peacefully wanting to overthrow the government, which they did.
Yeah.
And by the way, it's unbelievable to me that 2 years after the radical right could have been in such disgrace, have wrecked the government, increased the deficits $2 trillion. We're in total disgust around the country that they could be back in power the way they are today. And that's really a puzzling and terrifying realization. But whether we'll have that kind of uprising, I don't know. Well, let me sign some of those because I know some people need to leave. Yes, you have a question.